So California has way more House seats than it should because they have such a high population of illegal aliens. So they get rewarded for welcoming illegal aliens into their state, giving them federal benefits, actually asking the taxpayers of states like Ohio to subsidize them. And then those same taxpayers in Ohio and Indiana and elsewhere, they have fewer congressional representatives because of what California has allowed to happen. That's ridiculously unfair. And the only real way to fight back against it is for us to redistrict in some ways as aggressively as these hard blue states have done.
All right, so we got even more updates to bring you here on what I've been referring to as the Texas redistricting battle, although at this point I truly do believe it has become a nationwide story because of the fact that Mr. Loudmouth himself, Gavin Newsom, has spent the past several weeks doing what he does best, which is run his mouth about how if the Texas Republicans gerrymander their state, despite the fact that California and most Democrat states are already heavily gerrymandered, then we will respond by retaliating. We're going to abolish our independent commission. We're going to make sure that you can't rig the 2026 midterms. You're now getting a response to that very argument from J.D. Vance and the nationwide Republican Party and Trump administration, because this week they're essentially saying back to Gavin Newsom, okay, we're not even going to wait for you to see if you're serious about this threat to retaliate. Why not redistrict even more Republican states? Because as I've covered thus far before, when you look at the nationwide picture after the 2020 census, the simple truth is Democrats heavily gerrymandered, Republicans didn't really do it, number one. But secondly, the real issue that the Democrats are going to run into here is that if they really want to make this a nationwide fight, right? You're in this constant spiral of retaliation where your state's going to gerrymander, so ours is going to do it back and all this stuff. They have two problems. First of all, Democrats have already largely hit their ceiling when it comes to gerrymandering because guess what? Despite all of their moral virtue signaling about it, they heavily gerrymander. But beyond that, I think the important point here that we ought not to miss is that, hey, guess what, Democrats? We have more states than you. Have you realized this? There are actually more Republican red states in America than there are Democrats. And sure, you could argue about population size. Some Republican states are pretty small. But guess what? If you want to get into this endless death spiral of redistricting, guess who wins that battle in the end? The Republicans, inevitably. So I want to bring you this full story here today because we got to talk about a recent interview that Vice President J.D. Vance had with Fox News where he announced that this week he did indeed go to the Republican state of Indiana to push those very governors and lawmakers to redistrict their congressional map. You've heard similar rumblings out of places like Ohio, Florida, and Missouri now in the mix. Hey, Democrats, you could just leave Texas alone, but this is a true situation where you're saying F around and find out. No, we're saying F around and find out, because if you want to start getting into this game, it's not going to look very good for you because of everything that I just laid out. So we'll tell you all about it, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Subscribing here, guys, is not only the best way to support our work, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of our latest news and coverage. And with that said, let's get into today's latest updates on the redistricting battle. So first of all, we got to give you some brief news on the grandstanding, right? The Democrat lawmakers who we covered this week fled the state capitol in order to try to deny the vote by not allowing a quorum. We talked about how in the state of Illinois, in the city of Chicago, where many of the Democrats fled to one of the most gerrymandered states in America to protest gerrymandering, we saw arrest warrants get issued there. But apparently, after Pritzker decided to have the idea, it turns out here allegedly that Gavin Newsom's state has joined in the party, now similarly sheltering Democrat lawmakers, breaking Texas state law by allowing them to not go to work. And so with that said, we got the announcement from Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton that today they are now enforcing arrest warrants for rogue Democrats who went to California as well. He here states that Gavin Newsom may be comfortable with lawlessness and the protection of corrupt legislators, but Texas will not tolerate elected officials who defy the Constitution for political theater. So there you have it. AG Paxton and Speaker Burrows here say that they're now taking the enforcement nationwide filing first in Illinois after the stunt we saw, but apparently also now in California to ensure that no lawmaker can run from the consequences of abandoning their oath. This legal action mirrors a similar petition that Attorney General Ken Paxton and Speaker Burrows filed in Illinois earlier this week. It seeks to enforce the quorum warrants in accordance with the full faith and credit clause of the U.S. Constitution and federal statutes. So I have to imagine, by the way, thus far that these blue states are refusing to extradite them, but we'll see what happens, right? I'm sure this issue will go to court. With that said, we of course have the endless gaslighting here from Gavin Newsom, because while as we speak, guys, keep this in mind, as he said so publicly, this is not exactly some giant secret, he is seeking to abolish the quote-unquote independent redistricting commission that drew his congressional map, even though they're not all that independent. So while he's trying to do that, which, by the way, was approved overwhelmingly by voters in a ballot proposition back in the 2010 election, this is now what he's saying, right? Quote, "What separates us from these Republican states is that California trusts our voters. We do not play political games," he says, as he's currently trying to overturn a decision made by his own voters and, of course, playing political games. Take a listen for yourself. And we've seen about 1 million cases of Gavin Newsom doing this, but here is the latest example.
We'll pick up 5 seats with the consent of the people. And that's the difference between the approach we're taking and the approach they're taking. We're doing it on a temporary basis. We're doing it in a fully transparent way. And we're doing it by asking the people of the state of California for their consent and support. Mark that stark contrast to what's happening in Texas and other states. We have till August 22nd. With the leadership behind me, they will get this on the ballot. We're calling for a special election. We will raise an unprecedented amount of attention, and we will garner an unprecedented amount of support because people understand what's at stake.
Yeah, well, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But with that said, let's get into the very issues with what Gavin Newsom is saying. First and foremost, in order to truly get rid of the independent commission, he is going to have to order a special election on a very short timetable, although I'm sure it wouldn't surprise me at all if Newsom tries to jump through all the legal loopholes to kind of abuse it and then manage to get it on the election despite not going through the proper process there. Nonetheless, let's also talk, first of all, about the so-called Independent Redistricting Commission, because this is something that Newsom has constantly made the excuse of, oh, California plays fair because we have an independent commission. And so many Democrats nationwide have defended this type of stuff, despite the fact that many Democrat states also do partisan redistricting, like Texas is looking to perform right now. But with that in mind, it's also worth noting here that the so-called independent commission, I know this is going to be a huge surprise to everyone, is not exactly all that independent. California is indeed heavily gerrymandered. And by the way, if you don't believe me, I mean, just break down the math there, right? You're talking about a state that is about 38 to 40% Republican, and the Republicans only have 15 to 17% of the seats. Guess what that is? Gerrymandering. Here is, by the way, now California governor's candidate, Steve Hilton, breaking down this very lie for themselves. And yes, indeed, it is simply not true that Texas supposedly started this whole thing. No, blue states like California and Illinois started it by gerrymandering egregiously in the 2020 census, and then now being shocked that Republicans got smart to their game and are responding to it. But of course, that makes us the bad guys, right?
Well, it's hilarious, Harris, to see these Democrats talk about moral clarity and rigging the system, because all of this unfairness was actually started by Democrats, and it was started by Democrats right here in California. People say that when you see this playing out between the states, it's a tit for tat. If Texas moves first, then Illinois and California will respond and so on. No, it was California that started this. In 2008, the people of California voted for an independent commission to draw the legislative districts. What did Democrats do in California? They hijacked and corrupted that process, and they gerrymandered California districts to steal 12 House seats from Republicans. That's what started all this. That's what made it not a level playing field. And so when Gavin Newsom, who's now saying that if Texas goes ahead, he's going to call a special election to overturn the California Constitution, to steal another 5 House seats from Republicans. I'm saying no to that. I've been in conversation with my lawyers all weekend. We've got the legal basis now, and we're going to be announcing this tomorrow to stop Gavin Newsom if he tries to go ahead with his further gerrymandering of the district. So we've got to realize who started this. It was Democrats.
See, this is exactly why I reject all of the Democrat virtue signaling about every aspect of this, right? Because you're now seeing the rhetoric that Democrats support a nationwide ban on gerrymandering, but Republicans won't get on board. Haha, we're so much better than you. And it's like, first of all, okay, so you guys support the race-based gerrymandering of the Voting Rights Act that is heavily abused and nowadays in modern America exclusively only benefits Democrats in deep red states? Oh, no, you're not for that, right? That gerrymandering is good, but when Republicans counter that gerrymandering, that's the type of gerrymandering we want to make illegal, right? They say they want these independent commissions, right? We should have independence. There shouldn't be partisan drawing of the maps. And yet their gold shining star example of the independent commissions we need on gerrymandering, guess what? Looks like the so-called Independent Commission of California. And that's what you're expecting us to sign on? And you're saying that, oh, you're so much better than us. You really are against gerrymandering. It's about principles. Get the freak out of here, right? That's why I'm completely like, shut up. None of you guys are against gerrymandering, unless, except for the kind that doesn't favor you. None of you are even for the independent drawing of the congressional maps. So there you essentially have it. And by the way, guys, as was recently pointed out even by Texas Governor Greg Abbott, a huge positive of Democrats making this such an issue and hammering it home time and time again is that over time, right, the more you bring something to the focus nationally speaking, the truth comes out. Maybe not in the beginning, but ultimately in the end. And the more they drag this out, the more people are able to point out the egregious instances of Democrat gerrymandering, right? How many times now has that Illinois congressional map been shown on TV? We even reacted to a state legislator in Texas who forced CNN to show it. He held up the paper. And this is exactly what is going on, because we know we're correct about this, by the way. We fully understand that Democrats are the most egregious gerrymanderers in America post-2020 census, and we reject the virtue signaling about it. And hence now, by the way, people are starting to realize, hey, you're saying that Texas is gerrymandering, but what about my state? Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. And that's exactly why every political hill that Democrats try to die on ultimately backfires in the end, because the truth basically never is on their side.
So 2 things about that, Martha. One is, one of the surprising developments of all this is the revelation of the gerrymandering in California, in Illinois, in New York, and Massachusetts, like what you were talking about. Americans had no idea the way that they had drawn those lines. The other thing, Martha, is this, and that is 4 of the 5 districts that are going to be added are predominantly Hispanic districts. We're ensuring that Hispanic voters and all voters in the state of Texas are going to be able to vote for their candidate of choice, which happens to be Republican. Democrats have turned their backs on Hispanic voters and others, and those voters are coming to the Republican Party.
Boom, exactly. But as I said in the intro, here's the situation where you're in. California is threatening that they're going to do this. New York, similar thing. Some other blue states are saying we're going to gerrymander ourselves even worse. Okay, then I say take those threats seriously. That's why this week it was announced that J.D. Vance went to Indiana and he pushed the state legislature there to redistrict their congressional map. And the very reason he gave here, guys, specifically called out Gavin Newsom in California in particular, because not only do these states have crazy gerrymanders, but also, as we covered, right, you talk about the fact that Trump wants to redo the census without counting illegal aliens. A hugely disproportionate share of national representation is being given to states like California, not just because of gerrymandering, but also because of the concentration of illegal aliens and it doesn't even stop here, right? And the concentration of illegal aliens in major blue cities like Los Angeles, because guess what that does? That creates a greater population density, which also allows you to draw more Democrat districts in a more urban area. Hence why Gavin Newsom What did you tell us about a couple of days ago? You said F around and find out. Now the tables have turned. J.D. Vance and the Republican Party are saying to Gavin Newsom, okay, you want to do that? How about now you F around and find out? Because guess what? Again, we have a higher ceiling. We have more to do. You guys have already gerrymandered to the max. And Republicans have more states than you, genius. How do you think this is going to end? Really?
You're just back from Indiana. Did you have discussions on redistricting with officials there?
We did. We spoke with the governor, with the Speaker of the House there in Indiana, and the Senate President. And the message I delivered is pretty straightforward. We want a unified Republican team. We want to fight together, win together, make big things happen for the American people, and obviously the people of the state of Indiana together. But one of the things that you see in a lot of red states is blue states have really aggressively gerrymandered such that they've actually made it harder for the majority of the state of Indiana to have their voice heard in their federal elections. Because if California has crazy gerrymanders, Illinois has crazy gerrymanders, New York has crazy gerrymanders, what it does is it actually suppresses the will of the people in states like Indiana. And the other thing that we talked about, and I didn't even realize this, Maria, until a couple of years ago, that for apportioning representatives, you actually count illegal aliens. So even though illegal aliens theoretically are not supposed to vote, we know sometimes they do, you still count illegal aliens for congressional apportionment. So California has way more House seats than it should because they have such a high population of illegal aliens. So they get rewarded for welcoming illegal aliens into their state, giving them federal benefits, actually asking the taxpayers of states like Ohio to subsidize them. And then those same taxpayers in Ohio and Indiana and elsewhere, they have fewer congressional representatives because of what California has allowed to happen. That's ridiculously unfair, and the only real way to fight back against it is for us to redistrict in some ways as aggressively as these hard blue states have done.
I mean, boom, there you go. What a solid articulation of all of that. Because not only are Democrats already gerrymandering, which should more than justify Republican retaliation in that regard, but you also talk about the overrepresentation of illegal aliens, right? The electorate in this country is not supposed to represent foreign invaders and illegal criminals. It's supposed to be representative of the citizens who actually have the eligibility to vote, and hence who the government and representation in our government is supposed to go to. And yet in a state like California, where they've spent decades incentivizing illegal immigration, guess what they have now? Essentially, from an electoral perspective, right, a fake population. Right, so you think about something like the electoral balance across this country and how close seemingly the national elections are, right? How neck to neck and wire to wire the midterms are, the presidential election is. And then you consider the fact a lot of that is fake, right? The electoral power, whether it comes to House seats or the Electoral College that a lot of blue states have, is overinflated by illegal aliens. Gee, I really wonder how it would look if, that was not the case. And just earlier this week, we covered that very fact when Trump was looking to redo the census. And we basically broke down the math as to how if California and all these illegal aliens were taken out of the census, and you had a more fair representation based on actual citizens who were actually supposed to be the only ones allowed to vote. In 2024, for instance, when you remember how contended and competitive the Rust Belt states were, right? Everyone said it's going to come down to Pennsylvania. That's the tipping point state. Wisconsin super close, Michigan super close. We did the math there, and it turns out that in 2024, Trump would not have even needed a single Rust Belt blue wall state to break in order to get to 270. And when you really break it down, when you take illegal aliens and Democrat gerrymandering on the House level out of that count, that's how red, right? That's how Republican the country actually is. Meanwhile, you have the overinflation because of illegal immigration. Same exact thing I so often bring up when it comes to the California economy, right? Karen Bass will say this about her city. Gavin Newsom will constantly say this about his state, that, you stupid Republicans always make fun of us, but we have the biggest economy. Have you seen our GDP, despite the fact that we didn't build that? We're actually crashing something that we inherited that was really good initially. But even on top of that, right, I always ask the question, how much of that economy is being propped up by illegal alien slave labor, right? You see that every time that, for instance, when ICE raids happen and people are spooked in LA, the traffic basically reduces by up to 50%. It's like, what is going on there? What is going on there is that even the so-called economic prosperity, the fact that California pays the most federal taxes, we're carrying the nation. No, this stuff is all a lie, right? And right now what you're watching is that Democrat bubble is bursting. And then suddenly when you really break down how this country feels about politics, the economic distribution of this country, it's all fake. It's all fake in terms of what the Democrats have painted America to be versus what it actually is. And that's precisely here, by the way, too, tying this all together as to why they're so upset over redistricting. Because they know that the moment, and by the way, removing illegals from the census, because the moment that you actually have a fair election that, you know, evenly distributes and is like really representative of the will of the people, guess what happens? And by the way, if you did the census and all that and all this stuff goes through, Democrats lose like 30 to 40 House seats if every state redistricted and you did the census stuff and all of that. So that, in other words, means Democrats would not even have a chance in any election basically going forward, barring some type of huge blue wave, to ever hold the House, much less have the Senate or the presidency, because guess what? That's how the country actually is. So that's what they're freaking out about right now, that we're floating the idea that maybe the elections will be fair and you won't be allowed to use gerrymandering and illegal aliens to artificially inflate your electoral representation. No, you can't do that. They're rigging it, right? It's so interesting to think about too, because then you realize how much of our understanding of like electoral and national politics and the national economy, all this stuff is a lie when you actually make it fair. So with that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Are you glad to hear that Republican states are retaliating? Are you sort of shocked to realize that, oh, wait a minute, we think every election is 50-50? No, it's not. It's actually not. No, it's because the electoral representation is being given out to illegal aliens through the counting of the census. Like, that's what's happening, right? So, I don't know. Let me know. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.